Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Curious Cube for our third episode of this season. How have you guys
Hello.
been doing?
Hello. Pretty
Well,
good.
it's been a good January, a good start to 2023. Like, so recently for us, it's been the IAP or Independent Activities period for MIT, which means it's not like normal classes. So we haven't started our second semester yet, but we're still using this time on like academic stuff as opposed to just like messing around like over break. So that's
Yeah,
been a big.
it's sort of
And
a winter mini time where you just do whatever. In my case, I decided to use it to take a sort of intensive Chinese class for credit, which is basically like learn a semester worth of Chinese in like 3 weeks. That's an experience, but it's nice to learn more. But it's definitely quite intense. It's like every day of class is a week of normal class.
yeah. Dang. And I hear like the MIT like language classes are pretty intense. Uh yeah. And then
Mhm.
Holden and I went traveling, but and we'll talk about that in a moment. But also recently were the Amy's. Wow. It's
Yeah,
first year
It's
that
been
I
a long
haven't
time since I took an Amy.
old.
it has been.
It's also
Yeah.
been a while
Wow.
since
Wait, this
I
is
took it.
actually the first year that I'm not taking the
Right,
Amy.
yeah.
Wait, I'm so
I know.
it's
Hi,
So
so
only just
old.
registering.
yeah, so
This is the
congratulations
first
to
time.
everyone. That's I hope you work I hope you did well. But yeah, now
Yeah, we
take this
know that
time.
there are
Make
going
sure
to
you
be
take this time to
yeah, we
rest.
know
You
that
did
there
well.
are going to be some people who did well and are happy about it, and there are going to be some people who are sort of not so happy about it. Um and so yeah, we know that people have a lot of feelings. Um So we just wanted to take a couple minutes to just address if you like are not so like if you didn't do as well as you wanted. Uh I think one thing that we can say about this is well, I don't know. Wait, well, maybe you guys can say something first.
So the first thing I just this is the most cliche thing to say, but it's gonna be okay. I hate the phrase. I don't really like the phrase. It's not the end of the world because like very nothing is the end of or
Basically,
not.
nothing is the end
Yeah,
of the world.
nothing really is the end of the world. So I don't really like that phrase. But um, if you didn't do well, this will not ruin your life. It will not like it, it does it does
There will
this
be
is not
brighter days ahead.
yeah, this will not define you or who you are. There will be better things to come if you continue to do math. And I yeah, I encourage. Oh well, first of all, I hope this one failure does not dissuade you from continuing to do math. So if you do continue to pursue it, then there are brighter days ahead, and don't let this one setback push you all the way down.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, like this will not be the first time you have to overcome a struggle. And like in your future,
You
there
mean
will be
not the
many,
last
many.
time?
I keep saying this. You're right. Not this will not be the last time you overcome a struggle. Like there will be many, many chances in the future for you to like overcome struggles as well, and you can kind of use this as a learning opportunity and then um, like prepare yourself for the future in this way.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there will yeah, like things will get better.
Yeah.
People and also just like in the future, people like when you get older, people just don't care about like your scores anymore. It's like just if you can just think of it as a learning opportunity and as just an oops, like just like if you're just like oh, almost as if it's like just I guess you can okay if you can maybe not a game, but like almost as if it's just like oh, it was a game and I lost the game or something. That was intentional, yes.
Wow.
But
Okay.
but yeah, it
Um.
almost but like almost as if it is like something like you're playing with and you like and it's just like if you just like were playing chess randomly and you just lost the game of chess, like it's just like okay. And I know that maybe it feels a lot worse if there are fewer chances or something, but just like it's you have a lot more of your life left. Just try to learn from it. And
Uh.
also, I oh, what were you gonna
No,
say?
no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, this is also a chance to sort of segue into the main topic of this episode, which
Well,
is
actually,
teaching.
yeah.
Oh,
I want to say
yeah.
a bit more, but I know it's also hard to look at the long term just from this like one from like a setback.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like even if I like even now if I were to look back and think, oh, I did poorly on the Amy, but like now obviously I don't feel it and no one cares. But I also remember back in when I did poorly on the Amy, which I did on multiple occasions. Um, like my first 5 Amy's, I did like not anywhere near my expectations. Well, actually, I guess the first time I was like fine with anything, but like thereafter, I was very unhappy with my scores. And I understand, and it's not a very it's a very sad feeling. It feels really bad to like not be able to reach your achievements, and like it feels really terrible in the short term, but just take it one step at a time. It's going to be okay. Just allow yourself the space and the time and space to like heal, and then
Yeah, it's fine to
when
like take a break
Mhm,
right after some
yeah,
sort of thing.
it's so yeah, it's going to be okay, but take the time that you need. And no one will like no one whose opinion you should be listening to will think less of you for did I word that right? like
I think no one whose
yeah,
opinion you should.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounded correct.
No one whose opinion like you should be listening to will like think less of you just because
Yeah,
of
just
how
like
you did on a math contest.
yeah,
So
like if someone thinks less of you, then like just like ignore them.
that includes
And
yourself. If you think
yeah,
worse of
like
yourself because yeah, how you did on a contest, then don't listen.
and ignore that. Don't
Yeah,
listen. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, easier said than done, but
but yeah.
you know, talk to yourself like you would
Just
talk
like
to a friend.
envision that person as like the mean bully whose opinion doesn't matter. I don't know if
Yeah,
that really helps, but it's
try to
yeah.
try to talk to yourself about it the way you would talk to a good friend about it.
And
Yeah.
it's gonna be okay. Now,
Yeah.
let's get to the
Yeah,
main
now
topic.
onto the main topic of the episode, which is
Yeah.
teaching. And that's sort of a segue because I think like there are I think a lot of people in the math contest community, like if you do a lot of math contests, you have like a lot of knowledge about math. Uh, it can be easy to overlook how much knowledge you have if you're sort of like if you're surrounded by someone like by a bunch of people who like are doing math contests at a similar level to you or a higher level to you, it can be easy to forget how advanced you are. But there are times when you can remember this by being involved in teaching. Because if you made the Amy, like even if you got a bad score, or I shouldn't say bad, even if you got a score that you don't, uh, even if you got a score that you're not happy with, uh, on the Amy, then you still made Amy. That's still in the top like small echelon of people. So there are like a lot of people around, like who are not at math at a similar level to you, and so like and of course, if you did have a happy with your score on the Amy, or making use of or whatever level, or even if you didn't make Amy, like whatever level you're at math, there are gonna be people who you can teach math. There are gonna be some people who are at a lower level than you that you can then like share interesting math with. And so I think we will talk about some of our experiences now, starting with what Isabella and Holden did in January. So, Isabella, take it away.
Actually, Holden, you go. Holden, you go
Oh,
first.
Holden, take it away.
Yeah, so some of you might remember, I think I mentioned this on the podcast last year, right? That I went to Ghana to train their IMO team and also speak to local schools and inspire them to consider learning math for fun. And this year, both of us, me and Isabella, have done the same thing. This year, I went to Tunisia,
And I went
and
to Ghana.
yeah, Isabella went to Ghana. And would you like to start off, Isabella, with
Oh, me?
how your
Okay.
experience went?
Yeah. So Holden and my experience, well, Holden and I did the same program, and Holden was the one who told me about the program, which is really, which was great. Our program experiences actually looked a little different. Um, my experience there was a little less focused on the IMO team, and it was more focused on like encouraging interest in math for high schoolers. So the first week, rather than teaching the IMO team extensively like Holden did, and instead of going to local schools, also like Holden did, we gathered up a bunch of students and essentially like hosted like a week-long camp for them in the first week. And so that was what my group mates and we were all teachers at this camp. And the second week was the IMO part of the week, but that was like comparatively less teaching, since a lot of it was just them doing Olympiad tests, which is kind of a bit like how MOP works in the States. So yeah, it still looked a lot similar to Holden. We still went to a lot of the same places. Some of the students that I interacted with were like, "Oh, I know Holden from last year," and I was like, "Yeah, he's really great. We're on a podcast together." But yeah, but like that all aside, it was legitimately one of the best experiences I've ever had, and I'm super grateful to have had it. Like, getting to teach students so like we taught them all these areas of like contest math that they hadn't seen in school, and they were all so like interested and eager to learn, and that alone was just super inspiring and one of my favorite teaching experiences like ever. Just seeing how engaged they were, how eager to learn that they were, teaching them all sorts of things, and then finally capping it all off with like a little fun math contest at the end of the week. That was just an incredible experience, and a lot of them walked away feeling a lot more enthusiastic about like math and contest math, and I walked away from it with like a new desire to like be just as motivated in my classes that they were. So yeah, that's like the kind of a short version of my experience with teaching in Ghana, but it was a fantastic experience, and I'm very grateful to have gone on it.
Yeah, my experience in Tunisia was similar in the sense that the students we taught were also extremely motivated, which like made me very happy to see, because the best kinds of students to teach are the ones that already want to learn, as you probably know. And yeah, so what we did was during the first week, or the first half of the week, we spent some time training and teaching the younger students, like a group of about 20 of them. And at the end of the program, we taught the older students, which included their IMO team. And in the middle, we went around and also visited various schools and talked to them. I was really impressed by like how knowledgeable and excited the students were. Especially like at one of the schools, after we gave a presentation about like what contest math was like and what MIT was like, we like the students had so many questions for us, and it was really amazing to see that they were all kind of inspired to like study in the US or learn math, so forth and so on.
One of my favorite experiences from the program, sorry, but also sorry, Luke, we're making you jealous. You should do it next year.
I will go to Ghana next year. Perhaps I will go to Ghana next year.
Yeah. One of my favorite experiences from the camp in the first week was there was one night, Friday night, where like my group mates and I were preparing for the contest the next day, and then we get a knock on the door, and like all of the students that were in the residential program just came flooding in because they had like questions to ask for like office hours. And even the ones who didn't necessarily like have a question that they wanted to know, they like looked over while we were like helping the other students that they were taking notes too. We had like a whole like little party there. We split them up into like different groups, and then like we focused on like we just like answered all their questions about the process or about like certain topics, or even like delving deeper into stuff, and that was just so much fun. I like took some pictures, and it was just like 10 people crammed into like my little room, but it was just so much fun. But yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I have never done anything quite like that. I have never gone to a foreign country to teach students, at least not yet. This seems
you did
plausible
give a couple
for the
talks,
future.
though, right?
Wait, did we mention that this program was part of like it was sponsored by MIT?
Right.
Did we ever say
we
this?
might have mentioned that in the previous episode, but just to reiterate, this is part of the MISTI program, which is MIT's like international program stuff.
It stands for
MIT
International Science and
and
Technology Unit.
Yeah.
Science and Technology Initiative.
Yeah. But yeah, I do have some teaching experience from just like I have when I was very young, I started going to this math circle at a local university. Just math circle in the sense of just like get together and some people do problem like the professor who runs the math circle like gives us some problems and we work on them. Um and like
Yeah.
this was foundational. I don't know how much I don't remember how much I've talked about this before, but like I learned a lot at the math circle in like experience with proofs and various stuff like communication or whatever. But like eventually the professor sort of started realizing like, oh, this Luke guy, he seems, he eventually he gave me the opportunity to lead a session. Um, and it went pretty well. And we eventually I got promoted to like co-director of the Mid Cities Math Circle. So I have led quite a few sessions of it. Um, I think I have learned some examples of some tips of what to do and also some tips of what not to do. I think one
Right.
thing no I know one thing
Oh,
I
okay.
learned not to do.
Yeah.
Okay, well
We'll
are
get
we
into
should
like,
we
yeah. So that's just all of our experiences with teaching. I
yeah.
guess like aside from that, I've done like various other teaching for like other programs and like some individual tutoring too. So just a quick disclaimer before we talk a bit about like teaching and stuff. We're not teachers. We are not professionals with a degree in education.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of nuance in that, and therefore this is like not at all
This
supposed to
is
be like
our yeah, this is like
we
our
are
own
math.
experiences, but we don't like know. We are like young and you were just sort of making some guesses or
Yeah,
something.
and we're not
Yeah.
math teachers or anything like that. Like definitely, yeah. So we don't have like an education degree or anything like that. And there's a lot that goes into like those like there's a lot that goes into like an education degree and stuff that we have no idea anything about. So
Also, it's
disclaimer.
important to
We're
note that
the
like a lot of this is tailored towards competition math and
Mm,
not like standard
yeah.
classroom math or any
yeah,
other subject.
y-
Like this only applies
Yeah,
to contests.
yeah, I think we're giving advice for this sort of like amateur math teaching that we expect people who would watch our pod like we might expect like high schoolers to be doing.
if
This
you're
is
a
not
kid,
professional advice.
if
Or
you're a
young high schoolers or younger or slightly older, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're a kid and your friend asked you to tutor them in like contest math, or like a younger friend, or like a family friend, or like a younger student who really admires you, or like an organization asks you to teach for them, or if like a math circle wants you to like lead like a session, just like Luke, or if you get flown out to a foreign country and now you got to teach, this is our experiential guide to like stuff that we've learned picked up along the way. Take with like a mild grain of salt, but I think we like the collective three of us have like non-zero experience, so maybe it'll be helpful. Actually, yeah, it should be helpful. um yeah, so do's and don'ts of teaching. In general, I tend to teach a little fast, which is kind of a problem more often than not, but because of that, I have like a constant paranoia of like running out of problems. So just like a baseline thing, make sure you have enough problems. Don't like if you run out of problems, it gets kind of awkward. But yeah, just like make sure you have enough problems of a wide variety of difficulties too, especially
Yeah,
if you're
that
not
gets to the
super familiar with the student.
yeah,
Huh?
that gets to the thing I was saying as the thing I have learned not to do.
Mhm.
Don't make the problems too hard. I have been guilty of this quite a few times where I would make a handout of just like the problems that were supposed to be called warm up would take the whole time or most of the time and would like not be actual warm ups. And it's
Yeah,
like,
one yeah, continue.
yeah, you want to be careful. It can be nice to give people some like nice easy stuff before you get into the like meteor problems. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, especially because like you really want to meet the students. You have to you have to teach the students you actually have, not the students you like imagine you have. You like if you just like in particular, just because you think something is if you think something is easy, if you think something is obvious, if you think something is easy, the students know less than you, so they probably don't think it's easy. If you think something is obvious, that's because you already learned the stuff. And so you need to think about it from the perspective of someone who's like only just encountering it for the first time, which is easier said than done. It can be tricky. It can be difficult to remember like how confused you yourself were when you learned it. But for example, assuming it's some tricky subject, but you need to think back to when you learned it. I have some chalk here for if you're wondering what that is. You need to think back to what you learned, to when you first learned it, and remember how that felt, so that you can then like relate to the students, understand. In some way, you want to be able to like think through all of the ways that the students could be doing it wrong, so that you can then like if you know what misconceptions they can have, you can address them better.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think one thing that I also do to make sure like the problems aren't too hard is to, in general, put the harder problems on, like keep them out of the handout that, you give the students, and like only give them to students who finish the entire handout. Because I feel like as perhaps a beginning student in, say, like math contests and going to maybe a math circle and receiving a giant list of problems, it's very discouraging to like only solve the first 2 or 3 problems, and then there's still like 15 more problems on the handout. So the way I try to fix this is like cut out the back half or 1/3 of the problems, and then like give them to students who finish the first part of the handout.
And in general, like you want your warm-up problems, like these warm-up problems to be if you're teaching like a new concept, you want them to be like direct applications of what you've just learned. So if you're just teaching Vietas, what is the sum of the roots of this? What are products of the roots of that? Just like very direct, and then slowly like tread deeper and deeper into like more tricky applications.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think the next tip that we want to talk about is like how when you're introducing new material, it's always very overwhelming to state everything in full generality. And I myself have often been a victim of this as well. Like, for example, when I introduce students to Vieto's formulas, like maybe like it's not a good idea to state the general case of
Oh
like any
yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Like, don't do
Be,
this.
be very like be very, very gentle about just like randomly writing down a bunch of algebraic expressions, you know, R1, R2, R3 plus R1, R2, R4 plus R1, R2, R5. Like, you don't need to write down a bunch of algebraic expressions. Just like if you can do things with actual numbers, people can get a better feel for it. I mean, this actually ties back to what I was saying in the previous episode about how when you're trying to solve problems, it's good to like look at special cases. If you want to teach someone about some problem, it can be helpful for them to look at special cases, especially because as a teacher, you already sort of know what special cases are the helpful ones and what you want them to look at about the special cases. And so you can sort of guide them along by giving them just the right set of examples and nudging them with just the right thing. Of course, easier said than done, but I think this is like a really great strategy if you can.
Yeah.
If you
So
pull it.
Yeah,
yeah.
going off of the Vietas example, I think like one way you would do this is even like instead of just stating like Vietas for the quadratic case, like instead of stating it for x squared plus ax plus b, I think a better idea is to like introduce Vietas by giving an exact concrete example. Like tell the student to solve x squared plus 6x plus 8, like compute the sum of the roots using quadratic formula, compute the product of the roots, and then tell them if they notice or ask them to see if they notice anything. And I think this is like the best way for them, because even if you just like throw them the general form of Vieta's formula for a quadratic, like using like variables as coefficients, sometimes it can still be intimidating.
I did that. Oops. But yeah. Oops. But if you, another good example of this is the principle of inclusion exclusion. Try teaching that to someone in its full general form, like with the full set notation. It looks like a disaster. But when you start off with a simple like Venn diagram, it's like very easy to visualize, and then you slowly like bump it up to like more general, like the higher generalizations, and then it becomes, it's like the notation itself is not so important as the intuition. Like when I think of Vietas, I don't think of like the big summation notation of all the, what is it, the symmetric sums, right? Yeah. So like
intersections thing.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm talking about Vietas in this case,
alternating
but
sum. Oh, Vieta. Okay.
yeah, Vietas. I'm talking about the symmetric sum
Mhm.
for like pi, like principle of inclusion exclusion. I don't want to think about like, oh, this intersect this, intersect this. I like will intuitively think of, oh, what do these sets have in common and these sets have in common, because that's like a bit easier for my brain to comprehend than like notation. And that's how like your students will want to like hear, know about it, so that when they're presented with the notation, they'll be like, ah, that's how you would write it if it was on paper, but that's not how I would like think of it. And yeah, this even applies for like, this also applies for stuff like combinatorics. Like if you're starting off like permutations and combinations, try it out with like small numbers, and then like stuff like that. But yeah, just don't go too general first thing.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you give people, like, if you're trying to have them remember some techniques, like, if you give people a really nice proof of something, like, then they can, like, intuitively know why it's true, and then they will, like, remember things better. Like, if you tell them pi, if you just expect them to memorize it, they're not going to do it. But if you, like,
You mean
help them
principle of
intuitively
inclusion exclusion, not the numerical value.
Yeah. But like if you sort of help them give the intuition of like, oh, how many for any element in any of the sets, how many times is it, like, which sets is it in? How many times is it? And then you like look at how many times it's in an odd number and how many times it's in an even. Like if you sort of build, you sort of make a nice intuition for them, it will be a lot more memorable. Also, it's memorable. It's a lot more memorable, like when you work off of small cases, to remember, like, oh, this pattern. I mean, that also works when you're solving problems. Like, I mean, just the other day, I had some like integral to solve, and it had the number 23 in it, and I was just like, nope, I'm not doing this. So I replaced the number 23 with 1, and it was trivial. And I replaced the number 23 by 3, and it was like pretty easy. The answers in both of those cases was pi over 2. So I just said, okay, I'm just gonna guess pi over 2. It was correct.
And thus
So,
Lucas was crowned the grand integrator.
oh shush.
Congratulations.
This is a side note, but yeah. Yeah, like if you give them, people will remember the specific cases and then just can remember like the general form is like that specific case. Okay. I feel like we
Yeah.
I think there's one more thing I want to say.
Yeah.
Which is, I know Isabella mentioned earlier that she has the tendency to go fast when teaching. I think one way that can really help you not go too fast when teaching is to not use slides, because slides make it very easy to lose students.
I have moved on from my slides days. After making those tech handouts, I have finally seen the light. They are better.
Yeah, like especially when teaching, I find it very useful to like use a whiteboard or a blackboard, because it literally forces you to write everything out.
I wrote stuff on my slides. I wrote stuff on my slides.
No. What I mean by this is
blackboard
like,
right over
it
here.
takes time to write everything out, right? That's time the student can use to like understand what you're doing. Because if you like already have it written out on your slide, then it's very easy to just click next slide, right? And not give your student enough time to think. Like a hack around this is to like write it on the board.
No,
and
I do write on my slides lifetime.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But I guess it's still better to have like a baseline written on the LaTeX handout, and then like
yeah.
Also, like when you're writing on a board, have neat handwriting, have it well organized. Don't be too quick to erase things. Yeah. Also, like check if students have questions like frequently to try not to lose them.
For my experience, a student who gets like lost, they will not tell you that they are lost. They just get very
They
quiet.
will just, yeah. Also, it's nice if you can have students working together somehow. Okay, we should probably move on. We've been talking for half an hour already, and we still haven't done the like puzzle part. So we
All
should
right,
like
so
be quick.
take
Yeah, let's
away.
be quick before my laptop battery dies or something.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So the thing from last time, if you remember the thing about like the numbers 1 through 2022 around the circle, and then like you go from 1 to 2, then 2 to 3, then 3 to 4, and then like what's the farthest distance, and then 2021 to 2022, then back to 1, like what's the farthest distance you could travel in terms of like little arcs. So the first thing I wanted to tell you is that like it's it's easier in the case of odd, because like let's replace 2022 by like 7. Then the furthest distance between any 2 points you can have is 3, like 1, 2, 3. So you could just hope that you could just go like 1 to 2 to 3. Oh wait, I should do it in frame. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 back to 1. Oh look, you can just basically you just make a star. It's sort of like a star. And if you just do that, in the odd case, you can sort of have it work out. You just every individual segment can be the longest it can be at the same time. And so that's just like easily that you can see that construction is just optimal because every individual segment is optimal. The even case, it's not so easy. You try to, because you can have diameters, but obviously you can't have 2 in a row that it's a diameter because then you go back to where you started. So you try to be like 1 to 2 is a diameter, then 3 is like almost a diameter that takes 1,010 segments instead of 1,011. Okay, so you try to go to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 or whatever, when every 2 segments in a row are sort of a diameter and then an almost diameter, which is optimal for 2 consecutive segments. But then you get back around and you realize, oh, 2022 to 1. You just only go 1 segment on that last term. So you're just like, oops, this is not so easy. So it turns out that this still is optimal. This like put all the odd numbers in order, then put all the even numbers in order. But it's more effort. I don't want to go into too much detail, but you prove that this is optimal by, if you look only at the even numbers, then the maximum distance you travel on any 2 odd numbers is like at least the distance between those, like at most the full circle minus the distance between those two. So like 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8. So then you just like prove that the total distance of 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, etc., like is at least some certain amount by proving that some 2 of them have to be far apart. So then you like go back and forth. And you can sort of motivate this by looking at because the construction sort of tells you that it has to be the even stuff, like that looking at every other one is relevant. I went a little fast. You can find more about this online. This was problem 1 on the IMO TST recently, actually, the December TST. This is sort of fresh off the presses, so to speak. Yeah. Also, the problem on the TST was raised about a rabbit.
Grading this was an interesting experience.
Oh, you graded
Yeah.
this one, Isabella?
I was like the head grader.
Oh, fun. I didn't do it this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Why
it was
didn't
problem 1 on the
you?
IMO TST.
I was lazy.
Wow.
It was also problem
I did
1
it
on the
last year.
EGMO TST. Yeah. So that was that problem. Okay, so we should like give you a new problem. So here is a problem from somewhere. Can you find a trapezoid that's not isosceles? Basically, an isosceles trapezoid is one that's like symmetric when you like flip the 2 sides, or like one
The
where
2
like,
non-bases are
yeah,
equal
like
length.
the 2 non-bases are equal. So can you find a
Wait, actually, this is
non-isosceles?
bad because parallelograms satisfy this.
The 2 non-bases are equal and it's not a parallelogram. Let's just say, like, can you find a non-isosceles trapezoid that's not a parallelogram? I think we can
How
just
about
say
a
that.
rectangle?
Yeah, I don't. What?
How about a rectangle?
A rectangle is a parallelogram.
But it's like, is it an isosceles trapezoid?
Oh my god, Holden, shush.
Anyway, can you find a trapezoid that is not isosceles, that's not a parallelogram, with the property that both of its diagonals are the sum of some 2 of its side lengths? So like ABCD, where AC is the sum 2 of the side lengths, and BD is the sum of some two of the side lengths. This is also from some recent contests, which we will tell you about in the next episode. But in the meantime, yeah, try to draw some pictures, try to think about how you might be able to make the lengths work out and fiddle around with it. And yeah, so is there a trapezoid where each of the diagonals, like, so maybe you have like AC equals AB plus AD and BD equals, BC plus CD, except, oops, that's fake. You can't have the two sides of a triangle be the third side. Think or figure it out. We'll tell you more next time. Play around with it. Anyway,
I guess that's all for today.
Yeah, so we will tell you where this is from and tell you all about it next time. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.